And picture a Neanderthal. What do you see? A hulking figure, maybe. Hunched over with a heavy brow and a dim look in his eyes. He's probably dragging a club, he grunts. He's more beast than man. This image is powerful. It's been with us for over a century. It's the classic caveman, the brutish ancestor we're glad we left behind. But what if that picture is wrong? Not just a little wrong, but completely fundamentally backward. What if the Neanderthals were not clumsy, stupid brutes? What if they were resourceful, adaptable, and creative? What if they felt compassion, created art, and spoke to each other in complex sentences? The evidence is building, and it points in a startling direction. It suggests that Neanderthals were far smarter and far more human than we ever gave them credit for. The old caricature has its roots in one of the first Neanderthal skeletons ever studied. It was found in a cave in La Chapelle aux Saints, France, back in 1908. A famous paleontologist named Marcelin Boulay got the job of reconstructing him. The skeleton was old. The man had lived a long, hard life. He was riddled with arthritis, his spine was curved, and he'd lost most of his teeth. Boulay looked at this bent, broken skeleton and saw what he expected to see. He saw a primitive creature, an evolutionary dead end. He reconstructed the Neanderthal as stooped, with a shuffling gait, a jutting head, and a brain that was barely up to the task of survival. He essentially created the club-dragging caveman that still lives in our cartoons and movies. For decades, this was the accepted scientific view. Neanderthals were the brutish failures in the story of human evolution. We, Homo sapiens, were the smart, sleek, successful heroes who replaced them. It was a simple story, and it was a wrong one. We now know the old man of La Chapelle was not a typical Neanderthal. He was an individual suffering from severe disease. He was the exception, not the rule. And the most interesting thing about him wasn't his hunchback. It was the fact that he was alive at all. With such debilitating arthritis and no teeth, he couldn't have hunted. He probably couldn't even chew his own food. Yet he lived to an old age for his time. That means someone was taking care of him. Someone was feeding him, protecting him. His tribe, his family was keeping him alive. That single fact hints at something Boulay completely missed: compassion, empathy. A complex social bond, things we don't associate with dumb brutes. This was one of the first cracks in the old image. And in the decades since, those cracks have widened into a chasm. New discoveries, better technology, and a willingness to look at old evidence with fresh eyes have completely shattered the myth of the stupid Neanderthal. Let's start with the most obvious place: the brain. For a long time, we've prided ourselves on our big brains. It's what makes us human. So it's a bit awkward that Neanderthal brains were, on average, slightly larger than ours. A modern human brain is around 1350 cubic centimeters. A Neanderthal brain was closer to 1500 cubic centimeters. Of course, size isn't everything. The organization of the brain matters more. And here, there were differences. By creating digital casts of the inside of their skulls, scientists can get a rough idea of the shape and structure of the Neanderthal brain. Their brains were longer and lower than ours. Ours are more rounded, more globular. Some researchers think these shape differences point to different cognitive strengths. Their Neanderthals seem to have had larger visual cortices in the back of the brain. Maybe they were adapted for seeing better in the low light of Ice Age Europe. Their world was a visually demanding one, full of subtle signs of predators and prey. Our brains, in contrast, show an expansion in the parietal lobes, areas associated with things like tool use, imagination, and social networking. The theory goes that maybe we were slightly better at maintaining large social groups, which would have been a huge advantage. But this is still just a theory. The key takeaway is that their brains were large, complex, and fully capable of sophisticated thought. They were not simple-minded. Their intelligence was just different, shaped by the demands of their own world. But you don't need to look inside a skull to see evidence of a mind at work. You can look at what that mind created. For years, the tools made by Neanderthals were seen as crude and simple. We now know that's not true. They were masters of a technology called the Mousterian industry. This wasn't just about banging two rocks together. It involved a sophisticated technique called Levallois. Think about how you would make a stone spear point. The simple way is to take a big rock and chip away at it until it's the right shape. The Levallois technique is much more clever. A Neanderthal toolmaker would start with a large, flattish core of flint. They would carefully chip away at the edges, preparing the core in a precise pattern. They were shaping the core not to make the core itself into a tool, but to prepare it to release a tool. The final step was a single, precise strike at one end. If they did everything right, a perfectly shaped flake, a spear point, a knife, a scraper would pop off. This process is complex. It requires forethought. The toolmaker has to see the finished tool inside the raw stone before they even begin. They have to follow a specific sequence of steps. One mistake, and the core is ruined. This isn't brute force, this is craftsmanship. It's a skill that would have to be taught and learned, passed down through generations. You can't learn that just by watching. You need language. You need a teacher to say, no, not like that, hit it here. And their technological skills went beyond stone. We know they worked with wood, shaping it into spears. These don't preserve well, but a few have been found, like the Lahangan spear, found between the ribs of a mammoth skeleton. It was a finely crafted weapon designed for thrusting. Even more impressive is their use of adhesives. At sites in Italy and Germany, archaeologists have found stone tools with traces of black gunk on them. Analysis showed it was birch bark pitch. This is basically a Stone Age superglue. They use it to attach stone points to wooden shafts to make spears. Making birch bark pitch is not a simple task. You can't just find it lying around, you have to manufacture it. The process involves heating birch bark in a container without any oxygen to a temperature between 340 and 400 degrees Celsius. Too cold, and the pitch won't form. Too hot, and it burns away. This is a controlled chemical process. It's primitive chemistry. They had to invent a way to do this, perhaps by burying rolls of bark in a pit and building a fire on top. It's a multi-stage process that requires planning, patience, and a deep understanding of materials. This is not the work of a simple mind. This sophisticated technology was put to good use. Neanderthals were not just scavengers picking at the leftovers from other predators. They were the apex predators of Ice Age Europe. They hunted some of the biggest and most dangerous animals on the planet. Woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant bison. These are not animals you take down with a club. Analysis of animal bones from their kill sites shows they were selectively hunting prime-age adults, the most difficult and dangerous prey. The injuries found on Neanderthal skeletons tell a similar story. Many of them have patterns of trauma, broken arms, fractured skulls, rib injuries that are incredibly similar to one group of modern humans, professional rodeo riders. They were getting up close and personal with large, angry animals. They were likely using those heavy spears to thrust, not throw. This required immense courage. But it also required immense intelligence. Hunting a mammoth is a team sport. It requires a plan. It requires communication and coordination. You need to understand the animal's behavior. You need to use the landscape to your advantage, maybe driving the animal into a pit or a swamp. A group of hunters has to work together, anticipating each other's moves, reacting in an instant. This social coordination is a form of collective intelligence. Grunting and pointing isn't enough to pull off a successful mammoth hunt. You need a way to communicate complex ideas, like, you two, circle around to the left. When it turns, I'll use my spear. This brings us back to the social world of the Neanderthals. The old view saw them as solitary, brutish individuals. The evidence now paints a picture of small, tightly knit family groups who cared for each other deeply. The Old Man of La Chapelle is one example. Another is an individual from Shanidar Cave in Iraq, known as Shanidar I. Shanidar I lived a brutal life. A crushing blow to the left side of his head when he was young left him partially blind and possibly brain damaged. His right arm was withered and useless, probably paralyzed from the injury. It had been fractured and healed poorly. He was also deaf in one ear, his feet and legs were also injured, and he would have walked with a painful limp. In the harsh world of the Ice Age, a person with these disabilities would have been an easy meal for a predator. He couldn't hunt effectively. He couldn't defend himself well. Yet he lived to be around 40 years old, a respectable age for the time. He didn't just survive his initial injuries, he lived with them for decades. Like the Old Man of La Chapelle, this is only possible if other people were helping him. They were sharing their food with him, protecting him from danger, and supporting him when he couldn't support himself. This is empathy, this is altruism. It shows that Neanderthals valued the members of their group, not just for their physical abilities, but for who they were. Perhaps Shanidar I was a wise elder, a storyteller, or just a beloved member of the family. His survival is a testament to the strength of their social bonds. This ability to think beyond the immediate, to care for others, and to create complex tools hints at a deeper capacity. The capacity for symbolic thought. For a long time, this was seen as the one thing that truly separated us from them. We had art, religion, and symbols. They had rocks and bones. This clear line in the sand is now completely gone. The evidence for Neanderthal symbolism is overwhelming. It starts with color. At numerous Neanderthal sites, archaeologists have found lumps of pigment, especially red ochre and black manganese. These weren't just random rocks. They were carefully selected, ground up, and mixed with liquids to make a kind of paint. What were they using it for? We can't know for sure, but the most likely answer is body painting. Decorating their skin for rituals, for ceremonies, or simply for identity. Using color to say I belong to this group or I am in mourning is a deeply symbolic act. It's a form of communication. They also made jewelry. At a site in Krapina, Croatia, a set of eagle talons was found that shows clear signs of being worked. They have cut marks and polishing that suggest they were strung together on a cord and worn as a necklace or a bracelet. These talons have no practical function. They don't help you get food or stay warm. Their only purpose is adornment. Their purpose is symbolic. An eagle is a powerful, impressive predator. Wearing its talons might have been a way of signaling strength, or perhaps it had a deeper spiritual meaning. In Spain, perforated seashells, some of them painted with pigments, have been found at Neanderthal sites dating back long before modern humans arrived in the area. They were collecting beautiful objects and modifying them to be worn. This is a universal human behavior. But the most stunning evidence for Neanderthal symbolism comes from deep within caves in Spain. For decades, we believed that all the beautiful Ice Age cave paintings of the bison, the horses, the hand stencils were made by our ancestors, Homo sapiens. Then, in 2018, a new dating technique changed everything. Researchers used a method called uranium-thorium dating to test the thin layers of calcite that had formed on top of some paintings in 3 different Spanish caves. This method can give a minimum age for the art underneath. The results were a shock. A red ladder-like symbol in La Pasiega cave was at least 64,800 years old. A hand stencil in Maltraviezo cave was at least 66,700 years old. Red paint on stalactites in Ardales cave was at least 65,500 years old. These dates are incredibly important, because Homo sapiens did not arrive in Spain until more than 20,000 years later. The only people who could have made this art were Neanderthals. This was a bombshell. It means Neanderthals were entering the deep, dark, dangerous parts of caves, a world away from their living spaces, and painting symbols on the walls. This is not a practical activity. It is a ritual, a spiritual, a mythological act. It proves, beyond any reasonable doubt, that they had the capacity for abstract thought and symbolism that we once thought was uniquely ours. They were creating art. This symbolic world likely extended to their views on death. Did Neanderthals bury their dead? This is a contentious topic, but the evidence is growing. At sites like Shanidar Cave, individuals appear to have been deliberately placed in pits dug into the cave floor. One skeleton, Shanidar 4, was found with clumps of pollen around him. This led to the romantic idea of the flower burial, that his clan had laid him to rest on a bed of flowers. More recent analysis suggests the pollen might have been brought in by burrowing rodents. But even if the flowers weren't deliberate, the burial itself was. The body was intentionally positioned in a flexed fetal position. Other sites show similar patterns. Deliberately burying the dead, rather than just leaving a body to be scavenged, is a profound act. It suggests a sense of loss, a respect for the deceased, and maybe even a belief in an afterlife. It separates the world of the living from the world of the dead. It is a ritual. All of this complex tools, coordinated hunting, social care, art burial points to one final, crucial question. Did they have language? We can't dig up fossilized words, so the evidence has to be indirect. But it's very strong. First, there's the anatomy. For speech, you need the right vocal equipment. A key piece of this is the hyoid bone, a small U-shaped bone in the throat that supports the tongue and larynx. It's the only bone in the body not connected to any other bone. For a long time, no Neanderthal hyoid had been found. Then, in 1983, one was discovered in Israel, and it was virtually identical to a modern human's. This suggests their vocal tract was capable of producing a wide range of sounds, just like ours. Second, there's genetics. A few years ago, scientists managed to sequence the Neanderthal genome from ancient DNA. They went looking for genes known to be important for language. One of the most famous is a gene called FOX2. All humans with a mutated version of this gene have severe speech and language problems. When they looked at the Neanderthal genome, they found they had the same version of FOXP2 that we do. This doesn't prove they could speak, but it shows they didn't have a known genetic barrier to it. But the strongest evidence for language is everything else we've already discussed. How do you teach someone the multi-step level laws technique without language? How do you coordinate a group of hunters to bring down a mammoth with just grunts and gestures? How do you maintain complex social relationships, care for the sick and elderly, and pass down knowledge from one generation to the next? Language is the software that makes all of this possible. It's the thread that ties everything together. Given their large brains and everything they were able to do, it seems almost certain that Neanderthals had a complex, sophisticated form of communication. We will never know what it sounded like, what stories they told around their fires, but it's hard to imagine their world without it. So, if Neanderthals were so intelligent, so capable, and so much like us, where did they go? Why are we here and they are not? This is one of the biggest mysteries in human evolution. The old answer was simple: we were smarter, so we won. We outcompeted them, killed them off, and took their land. The real story is likely much more complicated and less dramatic. First, we have to acknowledge that we did meet them. When groups of Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa and into the Middle East and Europe, they found a land that had been home to Neanderthals for hundreds of thousands of years. And we know what happened when they met. They had children together. The proof is in our DNA. Most modern humans with ancestry outside of Africa carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA in their genomes. This is a profound discovery. It means that on some level, we saw each other as the same. We recognized each other as people, as potential mates. This was not a simple story of us versus them. It was a complex interaction of different human groups over thousands of years. We didn't just replace them, we absorbed some of them into our own population. Their genetic legacy lives on in us today, but still, as a distinct species or subspecies, they disappeared from the fossil record around 40,000 years ago. Why? It probably wasn't one single thing, but a combination of factors that gave our ancestors a slight edge over the long run. The climate was a major player. The late Ice Age was a time of wild climate swings, with conditions flipping from relatively warm to brutally cold and back again very quickly. Neanderthals were highly adapted to a cold, forested environment. When the climate changed rapidly, the landscapes and the animals they relied on changed too. Our ancestors, having evolved in the more variable climate of Africa, may have been slightly more adaptable, more flexible in their diet and behavior. The population size and structure probably mattered too. Genetic evidence suggests that Neanderthals lived in small, isolated groups. Their total population was never very large. Homo sapiens, on the other hand, seem to have lived in larger, more interconnected groups. A larger population is more resilient. If one group dies out, others can move in. A larger social network also means ideas and innovations can spread more quickly. A new tool or a better hunting technique could ripple through a large sapiens population, while a similar innovation in a small Neanderthal group might die out with them. There may have been subtle biological differences as well. Neanderthals had very robust muscular bodies. They were built for power, but that powerful body came at a cost. It required more calories to maintain. Some estimates suggest a Neanderthal needed hundreds more calories per day than a contemporary Homo sapiens just to stay alive. In the lean times of the Ice Age, that higher energy budget could have been a real disadvantage. If you need 3,500 calories a day, and there are only 3,000 to be found, you're in trouble. If your neighbor only needs 3,000, they get by. Over many generations, that small difference can be decisive. So it probably wasn't a war. It wasn't the case of a superior species wiping out an inferior one. It was more likely a slow, sad fading. A combination of climate stress, a smaller and more fragmented population, and direct, but not necessarily violent, competition with a new human group that was slightly more adaptable and had a slightly more efficient biology. For thousands of years, they were pushed into more marginal lands, their populations dwindled, and eventually they were gone. The last Neanderthals may have made their final stand on the Rock of Gibraltar, looking out at a world that no longer had a place for them. The image of the dumb, club-dragging Neanderthal is dead. Science has killed it. In its place is a picture of a complex and capable human, a different branch of our own family tree. They were not a failed experiment, they were a success story, surviving and thriving for hundreds of thousands of years in the harsh conditions of Ice Age Eurasia. They cared for their sick and old. They created technology that required skill and forethought. They adorned themselves with jewelry and pigments. They ventured into the darkness of caves to create art. They mourned their dead. They almost certainly told stories around their fires in a language we will never hear. They were not us. Their minds may have worked in subtly different ways. They solved the problems of survival with their own unique set of cognitive tools. Yes, but they were, without a doubt, human. Recognizing their humanity doesn't diminish our own story. It enriches it. It shows us that there was more than one way to be a thinking, feeling person on this planet. For a brief time in our evolutionary history, we shared the world with another kind of human intelligence. And when we look in the mirror, we can still see a faint echo of them looking back. Their story is a part of our own.